Number 16.
Does he want to take up his resolution?
Yeah, I think you should take up item number 16, your resolution,
Yes, ma'am.
while you're here.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senators. SJR-20 urges the United States Congress to lift a prohibition on publicly funded scientific research on the causes of gun violence and its effects on public health. This resolution also calls upon Congress to appropriate funds to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and other relevant federal agencies to address the public health crisis caused by gun violence. Since 1996, and in spite of staggering numbers of gun-related deaths, Congress has prohibited the CDC and other federal agencies from conducting scientific research on this topic. During the same period, the federal government has spent $240 billion a year on traffic safety research, which kills the same number of people as gun violence every year. This lack of research has made it more difficult to objectively assess the public health impacts of gun violence and find ways to reduce the number of innocent lives lost every year. Too many of our sons and daughters, too many of our brothers and sisters, too many of our mothers, fathers have fallen victim to gun violence in California and throughout the United States. It is time for Congress to lift a prohibition on publicly funded research and treat gun violence as the public health crisis that it is. The time is obviously now to act. I respectfully ask for your aye vote. We have witnesses Julie Leftwich from the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence and Amanda Wilcox, the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. Thank you for your presence today.
Thank you. Speakers in support of the bill.
Good morning. Juliet Leftwich from the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. As you just heard, research is obviously critical to understanding threats to public health, including gun violence, which is responsible for 100,000 shootings every year in this country. Yet because of the gun lobby, there's been no federal funding for academic research since 1996. Fortunately, a handful of excellent academics around the country, including those at Harvard and Johns Hopkins and nearby at UC Davis, have conducted research in this area, which overwhelmingly shows that gun laws work. Yet we need more research in this area. We urge you to vote for this, and hopefully Congress will lift the ban on the research so that policymakers such as yourselves and others throughout the country will have more information about evidence-based solutions to our nation's epidemic of gun violence. I urge you to vote aye.
Thank you.
Good morning. Amanda Wilcox on behalf of the 27 California chapters of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. As one would expect, we are in strong support of this resolution and certainly wish that our federal leaders would fund research on gun violence. You know, we often hear about the shooting deaths, but of course the injuries are a public health issue as well, and over 100,000 people are impacted by gun violence directly every year, are shot by guns every year. I mean, if there's any other kind of health problem where there's that number of injury and deaths, you better believe our country would take action to try and find solutions to this. You know, with the automobile industry, in the early part of the last century, the auto industry said, cars don't kill people, people kill people. But researchers and physicians changed that debate, and they recognized that there are measures they could do, regulating drivers, making safer products, safer environments, that injuries and death could be prevented. And in fact, it's one of the public health success stories of the last century. One of the things I hadn't realized, as Julie mentioned, there is a lot of privately funded research, but the publicly funded research is vital because that is how we can get the sample size and the long-term studies that can really have the findings to see how we can address this issue. So thank you for carrying this measure, and I urge your support.
John Lovell on behalf of the California College and University Police Chiefs Association. We have the dubious distinction of having active shooter incidents take place disproportionately on our campuses. Last year, and this is chilling, Last year, there was an active shooter incident on a college campus once every 8 days over the course of the year across the country. Legislation like this is dramatically needed. We are strongly in support of this resolution. We respectfully but forthrightly urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Are there others in support of the bill? Please come forward, and you can just do a me too.
My name is Brandon Roberts. I'm here on behalf of the Health Officers Association of California. We're here in support.
Thank you. Others in support? Seeing and hearing none, are there speakers in opposition to the bill? Please come forward.
Just scoot over there. That's fine. Where you going? Right here. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Craig DeLuz with the Firearms Policy Coalition. I think first and foremost, it's important that if we're going to pass even a resolution, it's important that that resolution be consistent with the facts. And the fact is that there is no federal prohibition on federal firearms research. Specifically, people speak to the Dickey Amendment, and the Dickey Amendment reads, and I'll follow. None of the funds made available in this title may be used in whole or in part to advocate or promote gun control. That is the Dickey Amendment in total. So there is not a prohibition on the ability to do research. Simply, there is a prohibition on the ability to advocate, which I believe that if we're looking at really substantive research, it ought to be done in an area in which it is not for the issue of advocacy, but simply to provide the information so that those organizations, on whichever side of the debate they may be able to advocate for what they believe are reasonable public policy positions. I think that as we go forward, it's important that we understand that and that we not perpetuate, for what is, lack of a better term, a myth. It is for this reason that we oppose this measure.
Madam Chair and members, Sam Paredes representing Gun Owners of California, part of the gun lobby. And as my colleague very aptly pointed out, the reason that this amendment was passed in Congress was because the leader of the Center for Disease Control in writing was advocating gun control and was advocating research to justify gun control. In fact, the Center for Disease Control has done multiple studies, including one that you might not have heard of. It actually happened last year. It came out, was published, made a half-day splash in the media, and then it was buried. Why? Because the conclusion was that there was no nexus between gun control laws and gun violence. And this was in specific study of a particular community that has a problem with gun violence. The fact of the matter is, as was pointed out, there are many studies that are conducted, nationwide studies that are conducted on the subject matter. And as has been pointed out, the information that justifies the whereases in this SJR are we did a little bit of research ourselves, and we found that in order to justify this language, that you've had to change definitions. You've had to change definitions according to the FBI and Congress under the definition of mass shootings. The number has 17 over the last several years, not whatever the number was here, 500 in 2015 alone. The people that have been victims of gun violence regularly include, and we have been doing some significant research, including some of the information that has been put forth before this legislature. The victims of gun violence include people who are shot in active shootings by police for criminal acts. People that have been shot while committing a crime by law-abiding citizens to defend their homes and their families. These people are included in this category of victims of gun violence. So we think that this SJR is misdirected. We think that the fact is that national research can be conducted and has been conducted by the CDC, and we are in opposition to this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others in opposition?
Good morning, Roy Griffith on behalf of the California Rifle and Pistol Association. For the reasons my colleague stated, we strongly oppose.
Okay, thank you. Let's Senator Leno.
But I just had a question for anyone from the opposition. Do we know if there's been any research that does suggest that proliferation of gun possession, let's say at schools, universities, or churches, brings greater safety?
I do know that recently I believe it was UC Berkeley or was it Stanford, did a study that demonstrated that most active shooter situations, in fact, over 2/3 occur in places that are deemed to be gun-free zones. So that's one thing that I do know, and that's one you can simply Google and find.
I am not aware of a specific study to discuss, to research that issue.
But I'm sorry, you said that in gun-free zones there's more violence.
Yes.
Yes, there tend to be more active shooter situations. Once again, in areas that have been deemed gun-free zones. I mean, you just had a witness in favor of this measure state that the disproportionate number occur on colleges and university campuses, which are gun-free zones.
With that statement suggested, are you among those who believe that guns should be allowed at the Republican National Convention to keep it safe?
I believe that any particular individual organization ought to be able to decide when and where, if that's a policy that they wish to have. I don't know that I would speak to necessarily the Republican National Committee. I think there's some individuals that I would rather not see
at the convention, just to keep people safe.
I wouldn't know because I don't understand the specific logistics of what's going on there at the Republican convention. So it kind of be.
But might it be a greater risk of danger and violence if it is a gun-free zone?
I definitely believe that, as is the case with any gun-free zone, I believe that it becomes a target-rich environment. I believe that those who seek to perpetrate gun violence look to go to areas where they know that those who are there are disarmed.
That, Senator, is in fact a fact. Of the 17 mass shootings that were identified by the FBI and Congress, I believe it was 16 of them all occurred in gun-free zones. So that's
trust me, I am not arguing with you here, but if that is a belief, wouldn't it be hypocritical to suggest that guns should be prohibited from a convention?
No, Senator, absolutely not. In fact, we believe that, as we believe very strongly in the Second Amendment, we believe very strongly in property rights. And if there is any venue out there that has a rule that says that guns are not allowed, that is their property right to do. And my choice in exercising my Second Amendment right is not to go to that venue and participate if I feel that I would be unsafe in a place where there are no people that hold private guns. Again, the facts of the matter are of the research that has been conducted. Those people who legally carry guns with concealed weapons permits nationwide are amongst the most law-abiding of all people of all segments of society. And they're not the problem.
And that speaks to our concern in particular when we start talking about requiring the ability to advocate, because just as we've done with Senate Bill 1006, the idea is to create research that supports an already predetermined conclusion. And that's the reason behind the Dickey Amendment, was to make sure that if there is going to be research, it's going to be done objectively, and it's going to provide real information, not information that has been gleaned with a specific goal in mind, in this case, of increasing gun control.
Thank you. I would simply note at this point that what we're referring to here is a situation in 1993 where the New England Journal of Medicine published an article on gun ownership as a risk factor for homicide in the home, which presented the results of research funded by the National Centers for Disease Control that found that keeping a gun in the home was strongly and independently associated with an increased risk in homicide. I believe that those results have been either duplicated or confirmed by studies done at Davis, which conclude they're 5 times more likely to be used in the death or injury of a family member or suicide than in keeping an intruder out of the home. However, back in 1993, when there was a lot of media attention about that study, the National Rifle Association responded by a campaign to eliminate the center that had funded the study, the CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention. The center survived, but the Dickey Amendment was added to say that none of the funds for injury prevention and control may be used to advocate or promote gun control, and the CDC's budget was cut by the $2.5 million that had been used previously on gun research. So I would note that it can be problematic if scientific studies show what people might not want to see. But that isn't a reason not to do it. And I would presume the opposition has no problem with the other part of this resolution, which says that we urge appropriate funds are appropriated by Congress to do this research.
Is that a question, ma'am?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you support that part of the resolution?
If we were sure that any research conducted was going to be unbiased and would look at the facts and report fairly without a predetermined perspective or an inclination, we have no problem with research. As a matter of fact, many research studies have come out and shown the utility of firearms ownership. Even Attorney General Janet Reno, under President Bill Clinton, admitted that 1.5 million times a year, law-abiding citizens use guns to protect themselves. That was done through research. We didn't report it. She did. We found out about the research and said, yay. And as a matter of fact, the researchers were saying that the number is actually probably closer to 3 million times that law-abiding citizens use firearms. So it's not a problem of research that we have. It's an issue of fairness and honesty that we have in sharing that. When you go in with a predetermined, listen, everybody on this panel has political experience. Everybody knows how you do a survey and you come out with a predetermined result. That has been carried over into the research area, and that is our great concern. We don't want research conducted that comes out with a predetermined result. That is not what we're advocating.
I would simply note that the New England Journal of Medicine does peer-reviewed articles, and we do get into the who decides when a scientific study is a scientific study. It's been moved by Senator Leno. Senator Stone has
just
a comment.
a couple of questions, if I could. I just want to make sure we're clear that all the Dickey Amendment does is says that none of the funds made available in this title may be used in whole or part to advocate for promote gun control. It does not stop the allocation of funds for doing any type of gun violence research, number one. Number two, President Obama in January 16th of 2013 gave one of his executive orders to the Department of Health and Human Services shall conduct or sponsor research into the causes of gun violence and the ways to prevent it. So it appears to me that there's been an executive order authorizing the funding. Congress controls the purse strings. Are there ongoing studies that are going on right now? And what is the utility and the necessity of this resolution if we have a president that's advocating that we do studies and the Dickey Amendment basically says just don't use it to promote gun control? Are there ongoing studies that you believe that are objective at this time, or is Congress not appropriated money for any studies at all?
We don't know ahead of time when the CDC is going to be doing a study. Typically, we find out after the study has been conducted and published, reviewed, and all of those kinds of activities. So we are not aware of any specific studies that are being conducted. That's the honest truth.
So maybe the rate limiting step is just Congress just needs.
But that doesn't mean that it isn't happening, Senator. It really doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Maybe the author will be able to address that.
Would you like to close?
I'm not aware of any federal studies. I'm quite sure there are many, but in this area where CDC has stopped the research is what this bill is calling for Congress to lift the ban on the research gathering that was stopped in 1996. I'm quite sure there are many research studies going on with various departments of the federal government. Of course there are. But this specific resolution asks for Congress to release funds so that we can begin studying the impact of gun violence in our nation.
Okay, is that your close?
That is my close. I respectfully ask for your item.
Thank you. Please read the roll.
Hancock.
Aye, and I would like to be added as a co-author.
Thank you.
There's an opportunity to
Thank you.
move forward.
Anderson. Anderson, no. Glazer. Glazer, aye. Leno.
Also to be added as a co-author, please, aye.
Thank you, Senator.
Leno, aye. Liu. Liu, aye. Monning.
As an existing co-author, aye.
Thank you.
Monning, aye. Stone. Stone, no.
Okay, 5-2, that bill is out.
Thank you, Senators.
Thank you very much.